some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
Right. So I was trawling through social media the other day and something sort of, vomited into my lap. And I thought, ooh, look at that. And you'll never guess who's back, Brent.
I don't know who.
Yee is back. But not the Yee that everyone's thinking of. Like, it's not Kanye, I'm afraid. It's Michael Yeadon, who nobody calls Yee, except for me just then. But Michael Yeadon's back. Hurrah! Michael Yeadon. Now,
great.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, he's got a new film out. We will explain who Michael Yeadon is and his backstory in a second. But like the important thing is he's got a new film out or a new interview. And a lot of the smart people and conspiracy theorists, Quasimodos and the like, were very, very excited about this. It seemed to be like quite monumental. It was called, and it's released by Oracle Films to give them their due. And it's called Michael Yeadon, A Final Warning, which could sound ominous, or it could sound like like you failed to pay your gas bill. But who knows? Anyway, it's just him talking to the camera for nearly 2 hours, basically. And it's not lit particularly well. And he's got this really sort of crazed look about him recently, Yeadon. He's got like a sort of starry-eyed thing. So he comes across a little bit like a cross between Charles Hawtrey from the Carry On films and a sort of PTSD-riddled Vietnam War veteran. So anyway, if people don't know...
He does have that wide-eyed stare, yeah, totally.
Doesn't he? I'm not even trying to be horrible. It's just that's this is it. And it's obviously because, he's got something serious to say. I mean, this is his final warning. So we'll see. But for those that don't know who Michael Yeadon is, he is best known as being an anti-vaccine activist, but he worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a long time. He's a retired pharmacologist, and for some reason that no one can quite fathom, in 2020 and 2021, he exploded onto the scene and started making a lot of pretty false and unfounded claims about COVID, about the pandemic, about the lockdown, about the safety of vaccines, and basically became a bit of a hero to the conspiracy world, partly because, and this is one of those sort of strange things about conspiracies, and well, everyone has these biases, but this is particularly sort of prevalent in the conspiracy world. He's a whistleblower, you see, or was seen as a whistleblower, seen as an insider, because he used to work for Pfizer. Now, a lot of you might be saying, but that makes no sense, Neil, because, people like Baller, Alfred Baller, was that his name? Or he worked for Pfizer as well. And people said, well, you can't trust him because he worked for Pfizer. Well, this is a different thing, you see, because he used to work for Pfizer and he was saying things that they liked. So that obviously shifts the balance,
that's how it
basically.
Goes.
Yeah. Now, the Times newspaper has described Michael Yeadon as a hero of COVID conspiracy theorists and also a key figure in the anti-vax movement. But as I say, it all started pretty sort of normally. He got his PhD from the University of Surrey, and his thesis was on the respiratory system of rats. And he's worked at quite prestigious places, a place called Wellcome Research Laboratories, focusing on the effects of pollutants and as well as working on creating new drugs. And then his sort of big thing that got him his credibility was that he served as the vice president of Pfizer's Allergy and Respiratory Research Unit. Now, a lot of people will shorthand that and say that he was the vice president of Pfizer. He wasn't the vice president of Pfizer. And some people have even got to say he's the ex-CEO of Pfizer and stuff like that. A lot of people have mashed up what his actual qualifications were, but he was the vice president of Pfizer's allergy and respiratory research unit, and apparently he oversaw the development of drugs for asthma and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So again, he's working within the mainstream industry. So what happened was, he was working in their Kent facility, but that got closed down. And so he basically decided that he wanted to found his own company. And him and three colleagues founded Ziarco, Ziarco, which is a biotechnology company. And essentially, like, he really looked out. It was bought out by a company called Novartis. Can you guess how much his company was bought for?
£1 billion.
Not quite, but still not to be sniffed at. £325 million in 2017. And he was the CEO. One presumes that was split between 4 people. So he did all right. Like, he could probably lend us a few quid, to be quite honest. Anyway, on Twitter, he said that he's married and he's got 2 daughters who are adults. But he actually described a bit of a tough childhood. This is a bit grim. Apparently, his mother committed suicide when he was only 18 months, which is horrific, obviously. And then apparently his father, who's a doctor, abandoned him when he was only 16. It's grimy. Now, he said that he was saved by a local social worker and then was adopted by a Jewish family whose, and this is a quote, whose open-handed love turned my life around. So that's nice, obviously. Well, obviously, it's horrible, but it's lovely that he was able to find some sort of solace, at least. So anyway, COVID happens, and Yeadon's got a blog. And he's typing away, blogging off, like, people do. And he started to sort of pick up traction because, and I don't know whether people remember this or not, but people lost their fucking shit during COVID. And all these people that had basically spent years and years bragging about how they totally would cope if they were off grid and, would love to go and sort of be isolated from society, when told to possibly stay inside and, not stand in large groups, went completely fucking tonto. And I remember, people started pulling all sorts of shit out their arse, like, it's not that dangerous, that it doesn't even exist, all of this stuff, that the whole thing is just an excuse to keep us locked down or to pump us full of chemicals or to introduce a digital ID through the vaccine passport. And yeah, people went crazy. So they were looking for answers. And bizarrely, a lot of people were looking for the answer that, this is not real. You don't have to worry about it. And that was essentially where Yeadon sort of fell. Like, in as early as October 2020, he was writing on his blog that the pandemic was essentially over and there would be no second wave. Now, needless to say, he was completely wrong. But that didn't stop his confidence. So in November of that year, he was invited to appear on talk radio with the vile and despicable Julia Hartley-Brewer. And he told her, when you've got a very low prevalence of the disease, as we had in July and August, and then you're going to see far more false positives, the pandemic is fundamentally over in the UK. These are deaths with COVID, not of COVID. So you can be in hospital for a whole variety of other reasons. You could have heart disease, you could have cancer, but if you test positive for COVID, you still end up on these statistics, don't you? We now know that loads of people had prior immunity, and I firmly believe that we are now firmly at community immunity. Viruses don't do waves. Immunity to viruses is mostly conferred by what's called T-cell memories. Antibodies are probably not very important. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you may have spotted that absolutely everything that he said there was complete and utter shite. He couldn't have possibly got it more wrong. The pandemic was not fundamentally over. You didn't see false positives. The deaths were not with COVID. They were of COVID. These are all sort of very well debunked tropes of COVID. But at the time, these were the talking points. These were the things that were being repeated by David Icke and by everybody that essentially didn't want to act like an adult and accept that, sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do. The idea that people would reach herd immunity through prior immunity and that viruses don't do waves. These are frighteningly inaccurate things, not just for COVID, just in general. And it's in many ways shocking that somebody like who claims to have the background that he claims to have would make such incredibly false statements with such confidence. The other point is that basically he's never actually worked with viruses or vaccines or anything like that. He's worked with in the area of respiratory diseases. Now, obviously there is some crossover there, but that's not his expertise. He also claimed he claimed that like PCR gave false positives. We've got herd immunity. That COVID was not on the rise. That people who supposedly died from it died of other things, and that viruses don't do waves. And as I say, I don't think I need to repeat, but every single thing of those was wrong. Now, just to sort of address that quickly, although we've addressed it on numerous other things, people say, but I know about that motorcyclist that died, blah, 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 and he was listed as COVID. Yeah, here's the thing, right? Okay, initially they were doing that. They were making a note of everybody that had COVID, but this wasn't to hype the figures. This was actually just to track the disease, because basically this is a way of saying, like, okay, if all these people with these death certificates in this area have got this added to it, that means that the disease is definitely there. What they did was, at a later date, they went back and checked and made sure that the disease, the statistic that they were using, that in all cases where COVID was listed, that it was actually the cause of death and not just something that happened to be happening at the same time. But Neil, they were telling us on the news, and they said that anyone with a COVID test within 28 days would be listed as this. Yeah, they did, and I've just explained to you that was for tracking. And a lot of people will basically say, well, that proves it, doesn't it? That proves that they're hyping up the figures. As they would do, except for the facts. Because ironically, that figure, the anyone positive with COVID after 28 days, was actually the lowest of three possible figures that the government could have used. And the actual figure afterwards, where it was COVID proven to have caused death on the death certificate, that was actually the highest rate. So if they were trying to fool people, why would they use the lowest possible metric? They wouldn't, would they? You've just got it wrong. Anyway, science feedback picked up on this pretty early, because you remember what he said about antibodies. Science feedback says, Yeadon's dismissal of antibodies as probably not very important is not in line with the well-established role of antibodies in antiviral defense. Antibodies can bind to certain proteins on the surface of the virus to prevent it from infecting cells. In fact, a key purpose of most preventative vaccines against infectious diseases, including the COVID-19 vaccines that are being developed, is to ultimately enable the body to produce antibodies that prevent the pathogen from causing infection. So again, he's just essentially wildly wrong about his statements, but, that's what was going on at that time, basically. So also in October 2020, he wrote an article for the Daily Mail, and the title sort of gives away the sort of his position, potentially. 3 facts that number 10's experts got wrong. And then the subline is, Dr. Mike Yeadon says claims that the majority of the population is susceptible to COVID, that only 7% are infected so far, and that the virus death rate is 1%, are all false. And this is the Daily Mail, so obviously, we have to take it seriously. Anyway, in this, he said, on susceptibility to COVID, the reality, though, is rather different. Firstly, whilst the COVID-19 virus is new, other coronaviruses are not. We have experience of SARS in 2003 and MERS in 2012, while in the UK, there are at least 4 known strains of coronavirus which cause the common cold. Many individuals who've been infected by other coronaviruses, have immunity to closely related ones such as the COVID-19 virus. Multiple research groups in Europe and the US have shown that around 30% of the population was likely already immune to COVID-19 even before the virus arrived. And this is something which SAGE, which was the advisory body in the UK, continues to ignore. So just to clarify what you're saying there is that COVID-19 is a coronavirus, and we've had experience of SARS and MERS, which are also coronaviruses, and the common cold, which is also a coronavirus, which means that the COVID-19, because it is itself a coronavirus, can't be any more dangerous or effective than those two, which some of you who dabble in science or common sense might have picked up is utter bullshit. It's basically like saying that my 1.2 litre Escort is exactly the same as that Escort Cosworth because they're both escorts. It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. COVID-19 was a new illness and a unique virus. Yeah, it was a close genetic relative of the original SARS-CoV-1, which is kind of why it's called SARS-CoV-2, right? But it doesn't mean that they're the same, right? And also SARS as well was far from a harmless illness, right? It was just managed well. By the end of the original SARS epidemic in June 2003, it had infected 8,422 people. 10% of those people died. So it was actually quite dangerous. It didn't spread that well and was essentially stifled, which is great. Good. We want that. MERS-CoV, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, has infected fewer people, but apparently it's even more deadly than both of the SARS viruses if you happen to get it. So MERS, there was 2,574 confirmed cases of MERS since it first began in 2012, and 866 people have died, which is a fatality rate of 34%. So basically, the long and short of it is that there's 7 different human coronaviruses, but they're all unique. Some are far more damaging than others. And to suggest that one is going to be like this because there's another one that is like something else is just silly. It just doesn't work. So he went on to talk about the number of infected. When applied to the total number of COVID deaths in the UK, which is around 45,000, this would imply that approximately 22.5 million people have been infected. And that's 33.5% of our population, which is not what SAGE said. SAGE said 7%. On death rates, early in the epidemic, SAGE modelled a mortality rate of around 1%. And from what I understand, they may now be working with a number close to 0.7, which is still far too high. After extensive worldwide surveys, preeminent scientists such as John Ioannidis, a professor of epidemiology at Stanford University in California, have concluded that the mortality rate is closer to 0.2%. Then that means that only 1 in 500 people who are infected die. Now, the problem with both of these things is figures are wrong. Once it was all correlated, the actual CFR was between the case fatality rate was between 0.7 and 20%, depending on how much mitigation was put into place. So essentially, SAGE was correct in both of their figures, and he's wrong because he's presuming that it's less dangerous than it actually turned out to be. On reinfection, he said, and see if you can spot the flaw in this one, Brent. The fact is, people don't get reinfected with COVID. That's how the immune system works. And if it didn't, humanity would not have survived. Oh, God. What was the most times that you know somebody got COVID? A friend of mine had it about 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had it twice, but I was just thinking like how many times I've had a cold or a flu in my life. Like you get them all the time. Like, just because you get it once doesn't mean your immune system knows how to
blocks
beat it every
that off forever.
It's like it just knows how to fight it.
Yeah, this is the thing. Anyway, it's like it's frightening. Yeah, it's frightening, isn't it? It's like he's spreading this sort of shit, basically. So he later claimed the vaccines.
Sorry, it's not like HIV. You're not going to catch that twice.
No, precisely. No, and shake it off, like so that you're more robust for the next time. No, it simply doesn't work like that. But he then went on to claim, or not in this article, but later, so all around the same time, he started saying that vaccines were completely unnecessary. And then here's a classic. Asymptomatic spread of COVID, in fact, asymptomatic spread of any disease was a myth. So it's interesting that you've just brought up HIV there, because obviously that shows that asymptomatic spread of diseases is not a myth. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so this was actually picked up by the mainstream press, and they said, a Facebook post features a video of Pfizer's former vice president, Michael Yeadon, who claims that it defies common sense. People with no symptoms can spread a virus, like the ones that cause COVID-19. The idea, for example, that you can be ill, this is Yeadon speaking, even though you have no symptoms, and you can be a respiratory virus threat to someone else, even if you have no symptoms, that's also invented in 2020. There's simply no history of it, and it defies common sense as well. Yeah, no, that's absolutely accurate, because prior to 2020, I'd never heard of anybody catching a disease without, asymptomatically. Heard you? I say you'd never heard of HIV or anything like that. Like, you'd never heard of Typhoid Mary, had you? You'd never heard of, people catching herpes, like people like Derek Jeter giving fucking herpes to half of the beautiful women in Hollywood. You'd never heard of anything like that, had you? What a ridiculous statement. It's just, again, but this highlights the degree of unreality that people were desperate to sort of gravitate towards during COVID, which make little sense, basically. He then went on to say, most of you don't need a vaccine at all. Most of you will be well advised to stay away from experimental vaccines, unfortunately, that do come with a blood clot risk. Why would you take a risk with your health for something that's not a threat to you? He then claimed that basically all the COVID vaccines were completely unsafe, and he decided that the best course of action was to write a letter to the European Medicines Agency, alongside a German physician called Wolfgang Wodarg. And they, in this letter, called for all vaccine trials to be stopped, falsely suggesting that the mRNA vaccines could target the syncytin-1 protein, which is apparently needed for placenta formation. So what he's saying, and what they were saying in this thing, is that basically these vaccines will make you infertile, because he'd spotted something about this particular protein, which is required for the manufacture inside of you of a placenta. But this wasn't his only claim about vaccines. There was a Telegram account that was also connected to it had his name on it. It seems to be his Telegram account. Can you guess what other theory he had about the vaccines, Brent?
Oh, go on. It was a depopulation thing, yeah?
Well, yes, obviously, yeah. But he had one very specific claim that was fashionable at a time.
Oh, it gives you AIDS?
No, not quite. But good guess. That they make you magnetic. Yeah, he was one of the people that promoted the idea that if you take the vaccine, you would become magnetic. Which
there's too many stupid claims.
Oh yeah, no, it's it's very, very stupid, very, very stupid indeed. So anyway, this thing about the syncytin-1 protein is that worrying? Well, apparently not. The BBC debunked him, and I know we can't trust the BBC, but anyway, they said a widely shared petition from Michael Yeadon, a scientific researcher who's made misleading statements about COVID, claiming that this current coronavirus spike protein contained within the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines was similar to a protein called syncytin-1, which is involved in forming the placenta. He speculated that this might cause antibodies against the virus to attack a developing pregnancy. Now, some experts actually believe that this was the origin, the official origin of the whole belief that COVID vaccines might harm fertility, because we saw that throughout. I mean, we still hear that. Oh, it turns up in the ovaries and stupid shit like this, which none of it's true. But apparently, syncytin-1 and the coronavirus spike proteins, they are quite similar, and that was the concern that Yeadon and Wodarg had. But they're only about as similar as any two random proteins. So there's no real reason to believe that the body might confuse them at all, because, the body can recognize proteins. It's just junk science. It's just bullshit. But apparently, evidence has actually been gathered that disproves his theory anyway. A US fertility doctor called Randy Morris, which, let's be honest, is a pretty damn fine name for a fertility doctor. He wanted to respond directly to the concern, to what he's heard. And basically, so he began monitoring his patients who were undergoing IVF treatment to see whether the vaccination made any difference to their chances of completing a successful pregnancy. Now, it was only a small study, but basically, of the 143 people in Dr. Morris' study, vaccinated, unvaccinated, and also previously infected, women were about equally likely to have a successful embryo implantation and for the pregnancy to continue to term. And the women were similar in most other respects. So basically, that was pretty much the only variable. And he pointed out, Dr. Randy Morris, that although the study was small, it's not the size of it, it's what you do with it. Essentially, he said that it adds up to a large volume of other evidence. And if the claim was true, Michael Yeadon's claim, you would expect to see a spike in the data, even in such a small sample size. I mean, if it's killing all of them, which is what he's claiming, you'd expect to see it happen at least once. And it just didn't. It just didn't. It's just bullshit. In 2021... he decided, and he's rubbing shoulders with, big media figures here. Do you want to have a guess at whose podcast he went on?
No, I don't.
Steve Bannon. Like human scab, Steve Bannon. Yeah. And he said in 2020, so, this is the thing. But this was, he was useful for all these people, wasn't he? Because he gives an air of authority and he's going to say what they want to say, which is going to undermine whoever they want to undermine at that particular moment, basically. But he went on Steve Bannon's thing and said, and I quote, "It's a crazy thing to vaccinate children with something that is actually 50 times more likely to kill them than the virus itself." So what he's saying there is that the vaccine is 50 times more likely to kill a child than contracting COVID. It's just nonsense. It couldn't possibly be true. Otherwise, how many dead children we'd have seen. It's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And do you know what evidence he's got to back that up?
Zero.
Fuck all. Yeah, absolutely fuck all. He just decided to pull it out of his arse. One thing that he is known for doing is misrepresenting VAERS, the vaccine advice, evidence, whatever, blah, blah, blah reports. And a lot of people do this. Can you believe that anyone could put any old shit on VAERS? There was one, who was it that was charting? It was a fabulous website that was charting all these ridiculous things. There was all sorts of ones on there, making your penis grow very big, making your penis grow very, very small, turning you gay was one. One person said that it made all their muscles swell up and they went temporarily green, like the Incredible Hulk. So the point is that you can put anything on VAERS. Can you believe that people have a vested interest in following these things up so they do actually check them afterwards? And it's just nonsense. He also, at the beginning of COVID, said that hydroxychloroquine, inhaled steroids, vitamin D, and ivermectin are all effective against the virus. Although that one of those things where it's like, well, why do you care? Because you've already said that the virus may not exist and doesn't affect people anyway. So why are you promoting all of these shitty fucking things that don't help people with COVID anyway? That was one of the things that I never understood. All these people pushing ivermectin with the people that were basically saying that it doesn't exist. Then why are you taking this? I don't know. So anyway, the mainstream first picked up on Yeadon around this time, and there was a really great expose by Reuters, and he reported on Yeadon and spoke to a lot of his ex-colleagues, and it was called Yeadon, the ex-Pfizer scientist who became an anti-vax hero. And the article said, in recent months, Yeadon, pronounced Yeadon, has emerged as an unlikely hero of the so-called anti-vaxxers whose adherents question the safety of many vaccines, including for the coronavirus. The anti-vaxxer movement has amplified Yeadon's skeptical views about COVID-19 vaccines and tests, government-mandated lockdowns, and the arc of the pandemic. Yeadon has said that he personally doesn't oppose the use of all vaccines, but many health experts and government officials worry that opinions like his fuel vaccine hesitancy, which is a reluctance or a refusal to be vaccinated, and that could prolong the pandemic. At this point, COVID has already killed more than 2.6 million people worldwide. These claims that Yeadon makes are false, dangerous and deeply irresponsible, said a spokesman for Britain's Department of Health and Social Care when asked about Yeadon's views. COVID-19 vaccines are the best way to protect people from coronavirus and will save thousands of lives. In January, a survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation, a non-profit organisation, found that 13% of unvaccinated people in the United States had heard that COVID-19 vaccines have been shown to cause infertility. What gives Yeadon particular credibility is the fact that he worked at Pfizer, says Imran Ahmed, who's the chief executive for the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which is an organisation that combats online misinformation. Yeadon's background gives his dangerous and harmful messages false credibility. In a debate last fall in Britain's House of Commons about the government's response to the pandemic, parliamentarian Richard Drax called Yeadon an eminent scientist, and he cited his view that the virus is both manageable and nearing its end. Drax didn't respond to a request for comment on this article. But more recently, David Curtin, that moron, a member of the London Assembly, an elected body, tweeted that there is a real danger that COVID-19 vaccines could leave women infertile. The cure must not be worse than the disease, Curtin wrote. But he too didn't respond to a request for comment in this particular article. Why Yeadon transformed from mainstream scientist to COVID-19 vaccine skeptic remains a mystery. Thousands of tweets stretching back to the start of the pandemic document a dramatic shift in his views. Early on, he supported a vaccine strategy, but they offer few clues to explain why he had this radical turnaround. Some former colleagues at Pfizer say they no longer recognise the Mike Yeadon who they once knew, and they described him as a knowledgeable and intelligent man who always insisted on seeing evidence and generally avoided publicity. One of those ex-colleagues is Stergios A. Moschos, who holds degrees in molecular biology and pharmaceutics. In December, Yeadon posted on Twitter a spoof sign that said, "Ditch the mask." Moschos tweeted back, "Mike, what the hell? Are you actively trying to kill people? You do realise that if you're wrong, your suggestion will result in deaths." When the coronavirus pandemic reached the UK in March 2020, Yeadon initially expressed support for developing a vaccine. He tweeted, "COVID-19 is not going away until we have a vaccine or herd immunity, which is natural resistance resulting from prior exposure to the virus." He went on to say that all that can be done is to slow its spread. A week later, he tweeted, and this is in March 2020, "A vaccine might be along towards the end of 2021 if we are really lucky." But then, a fellow Twitter user responded to him and said that vaccines harm many, many people. And Yeadon replied, "Okay, please refuse it, but do not impede its flow to neutrals or those keen to get it. Thanks." Ironic. This obviously would change as time went on. So while Britain, this is going back to the article, while Britain is still in its first lockdown last spring, he declared there is nothing especially virulent or frightening about COVID-19. It will all fade away, and it's just a common and garden virus to which the world overreacted. And he predicted in a subsequent tweet that it was unlikely that the death toll in the UK would even reach 40,000. By September 2020, Yeadon's statements were attracting attention beyond Twitter. At the time, a movement had emerged in Britain against lockdowns and other restrictions meant to curb the disease. He co-authored a lengthy article on a website called Lockdown Skeptics. It declared that the pandemic as an event in the UK is essentially complete, and that there is no biological principle that leads us to a second wave. Britain soon entered a much more deadly second wave. Great. On October the 16th, he wrote another lengthy article for the same website, in which he said there is absolutely no need for vaccines to extinguish the pandemic. I've never heard such nonsense talking about vaccines. You do not vaccinate people who aren't at risk from a disease, which, by the way, is just simply not true. You do to mitigate the spread of it. Anyway. In November, Yeadon appeared in a 32-minute video for an anti-lockdown group called Unlocked. And no one picked up on the Masonic overtones of that, but they were there if you had eyes to see. Anyway, in this video, he's sitting in a shed with a motorbike behind him. And it's titled, "The Pandemic is Over." Many former colleagues said that they're absolutely baffled by his transformation. Mark Traherne, who's the chairman of Talisman Therapeutics in Cambridge, said that he'd overlapped with Yeadon at Pfizer for about 2 years and sometimes had been for a coffee with him. He always seemed knowledgeable, intelligible, a good scientist. We were both trained as pharmacologists, so we had something in common. I obviously disagree with Mike and his recent views, he said. Traherne's company is researching brain inflammation, which he said could be triggered by coronaviruses. This does not sound like the guy I knew 20 years ago. So Mochos, the ex-colleague who took issue with one of his tweets, said that he considered him a mentor when they worked together at the drug maker from 2008 to 2011. But more recently, Mochos has been researching whether it's possible to test for COVID-19 with breath samples. He said, Yeadon's views are a huge disappointment, and he recounted hearing Yeadon in a radio interview last year. Oh, police are after us. There was a tone in his voice that was nothing like I ever remembered of Mike, Moshe said. It was very angry, very bitter. Earlier this year, a group of Yeadon's former Pfizer colleagues expressed their concern in a private letter, according to a draft reviewed by Reuters. And this was obviously sent to Michael Yeadon. We've become acutely aware of your views on COVID-19 over the last few months. The single-mindedness, the lack of scientific rigor, and the one-sided interpretation of often poor quality data is far removed from the Mike Yeadon we so respected and enjoyed working with. Noting that his vast following on social media and that his claim about infertility has spread globally, the group wrote, "We were really worried, very worried, that you're putting people's health at risk." And obviously, they mentioned a lot of tweets that Yeadon had been sort of pumping out that obviously charted his shift in his opinion. In 2021, shortly after this article came out, Zelo Street, which is an excellent political blog, uncovered several tweets that could be described as racist and bigoted that were from Michael Yeadon's account on Twitter. And he immediately went into damage control. He tweeted out, a tweet recently appeared under my ID, which was horribly offensive. As a result, my account was locked. I, of course, deleted it. I want to know, of course, that I didn't write it. And that was in 2021. And that would be more believable, right, if in 2020, almost a year before this tweet, he tweeted, other way around, Sharia is, in capital letters, their legal system. That's what we have apparently. That's what we will have apparently in a few areas already. It's not only Muslims who won't go to the police, but instead sort things out according to their beliefs and whatever their extreme nutcase at the local mosque preaches. He also tweeted, there have been scores of suspicious deaths of young women in the UK in recent years, none of which have been investigated because at first blush, the police decided that they were honour killings and they aren't going to get into that, which is absolutely dreadful. He also said,
no,
it gets worse. He also said in 2020, their concern will be concerned if it turns out to be true that almost every grooming gang into pedo rape and buggery are Pakistani Muslims. He also tweeted out in 2020, remember, underaged, unbeliever girls deserve no respect and any part of their bodies can be used for Muslim pleasure. He also tweeted out in 2020, there was a pseudo-scientific paper out recently which claimed that there wasn't a specific offence of gang grooming of children, so there couldn't be a report on it. Also, that Muslim men of Pakistani heritage were disproportionately involved. This was fake news. That they were disproportionately involved was fake news. I call bullshit. He also said, I've heard someone put that I've heard through the Twitter vine that the grooming gang report has been leaked. And Michael Yeadon responded, currently it's making its way down the inner thigh of a 14-year-old Rochdale schoolgirl, which is class. He also tweeted out, in the UK at least, I've searched but cannot find any non-Islam majority paedophile grooming and long-term rape gangs. Go and look in the EDL. Plenty of individuals rape, but this revolting gang phenomenon is almost exclusively a crime committed by Muslims, mostly of Pakistani heritage. Why? I have no idea. It's just simply not true. 85% of sex cases are white males. Just not true. Absolutely not true.
When was he writing all of these?
2020.
2020. So what, like around the time of the pandemic then?
Yeah, he was clearly bored. February and March 2020, basically. Someone wrote out, these illegals are Muslims. Why do they not go near their Muslim neighbours? Do they see them as a security threat? And he wrote, insufficient numbers of kafir underage females, which are fair game to certain Muslims, those who interpret Muhammad's relationship with female children as fact and legitimate. This is disputed by others. Ash Sarkar wrote, the stabbings in New York, this was in December of 2019. The stabbings in New York and the graffiti in Belsize Park and Hampstead are part of an international growth in anti-Semitic violence and hatred. Muslims have a responsibility to stand in solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters. Our struggles against racism are shared, which is a perfectly reasonable stand for solidarity. And Michael Yeadon responded, breathtaking. In multiple countries where Jews have recently been frightened or attacked, Muslims are more often than any other group identified by the victims of the originator of the fear attack. My guess is that they'd rather you maintain a distance rather than you stand near to them. So he's clearly got a bit of a problem with Muslims. He says there are 0 white grooming gangs, plenty of white pedos, get your claims right. And this was in response to, what's wrong with you? You've never heard of Epstein, nor his most famous client, Prince Andrew? Oh, right, that doesn't account because he offed himself in prison. And he said that's not a grooming gang abusing the same young teen for years. I know there are white pedos, but the gang MO is unique to Muslims, mostly Pakistanis. Or are you so hung up about that you won't concede that there is many kinds of abuse and details just simply don't seem to matter to you? That's utter fucking bullshit. Like, there was that grooming gang in Wales that was recently found. You could make the same accusation about the Catholic Church, for fuck's sake. Or Scoutmasters. Remember when Scouts was the place where you'd go and get fucked as a kid? Well, that wasn't the primary. It was more about learning knots and camping and stuff like that. But in some cases, that was the thing. Now, here's an interesting tweet from Michael Yeadon. Google Muslim and goat rape. There's a disturbing and quite definitive YouTube video. No grooming involved, but defo non-consensual. Now, that implies, well, it doesn't imply, it states that he's been watching bestial porn online and that he's Googled it. So,
and he's promoting it.
Yeah.
Telling people to go watch it.
He also tweeted, to make the adverts particularly appealing to Muslim men of Pakistani heritage, HR's telephone number has been tattooed onto the backsides of all white girls starting secondary school. I'll probably get banned for this, but I'm only teasing. I meant 14-year-olds, obviously. Oh, he's such a wit. He goes on. A good half pint of Muslim cum injected into those girls. Strong chance of serious, potentially life course-changing STIs, on top of the sex abuse and threats to the life traumas they suffered. These young victims should have received priority CAMH care. Did they get it, anyone? Does anyone know? So that's Michael Yeadon expressing heartfelt compassion and concern that these girls might have too much Muslim cum in them. I don't think anyone could see that his primary focus there is the safety of children and not using the abuse of children as a disgusting tool to spread your racism. Some might say exploiting those children, which is ironic seeing as that's what the rape gangs did. Anyhow, hey-ho. In 2021, Yeadon started claiming that basically the mRNA vaccine would actually release large amounts of spike proteins into people, which would eventually make them ill and kill them. And this was simply not true, mostly because it didn't actually have any spike protein in it. That was one of the major flaws in it. He also claimed that in the UK, you could not refuse the vaccine, and if you did, they would forcibly inject you or cart you off and imprison you and then forcibly inject you. Do you remember that happening in the UK, Brent?
I don't.
No. No, but that was his concern. And he started going on sort of more sort of quacky places like the Delling Pod. If we had air horns, there'd be air horns there. So imagine air horns went off. Yeah, there you go. Like, you put some effort in. You've got to we can't do all the work, audience. You've got to use your imagination sometimes. Anyway, he went on Delling Pod and he spoke about PCR tests and masks and the lockdown. And this is what Yeadon said. But I would just say quickly, you can't trust this government and its advisors. That's PCR testing, masks, and any one of you can do a quick Google search, effective masks on respiratory viral transmission. There's loads of studies out there. They definitely do not reduce respiratory viral transmission, and the government knows that. So why are they making children wear them in school? Why do they make you wear them when you wander around shops? You can't trust this government or its advisors. The reason you don't need masks is that what they tell you about you as well, that 1 in 3 people are carrying the virus and could be spreading it without knowing it, that's a lie. It's absolutely clear that people without symptoms don't have enough virus in their body, nor respiratory maneuvers to get it out of their body. This is just fucking bullshit. It's just utter bullshit. It's just not even close to being true. He's just made it up. And the whole mask thing has always pissed me off as well. It's like, aside from the fact that you don't wear masks, it traps the disease in the mask and makes you ill. Well, I thought you said it wasn't an effective barrier. Like, when you sneeze, why do you put your handkerchief up to your nose or your hand in front of your face? Like, this is what really annoyed me about that whole thing. It's like people started gaslighting themselves and going like things that we've known for years, just pretending that we didn't know these things, that coughs and sneezes spread diseases. That was a song. Coughs and sneezes spread diseases, catch the germs in your handkerchief. Like, large up on my Tony Hancock fans out there. Anyway, like the point is that these are all things that people know. Children fucking know this. And people were so desperate for an out that they went, maybe that's true. Maybe all those things that I've known since a child aren't true. Like, it's just crazy. He went on to say, in order to infect somebody, you have to be full of virus and symptomatic. Those two things occur together, and it's called ill. If you've got this virus and you've got enough of it to be able to cough it on another person, you're going to feel ill. You're probably staying at home. You might be in bed. And if you're older, you're probably in hospital. Typhoid Mary, anyone? We're going to talk about Typhoid Mary, the whole premise that she spread typhoid to people because she didn't know that she had it. It's a very famous case. Like, honestly, it's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. So if you don't have symptoms, it means you don't have enough virus to spread it on people, which means that you don't need masks anyway if you're feeling well. You can't trust this government or its advisors. And then maybe the fourth one, lockdowns, of course. We keep being told lockdowns reduces cases. They don't. They've been studied in at least 24 peer-reviewed journal articles by some of the best scientists in the world. As you probably know, the states in the United States that locked down didn't lock down or lock down harder. There's no connection whatsoever between lockdown and its stringencies. That's how much you were meant to stay at home and away from other people and the outcome in terms of death. That's demonstrably not true. And the best example of that is when Sweden decided to basically start implementing. They already had a lockdown, but it was a sort of voluntary lockdown, and they closed down schools and bars and and places with more than, I forget whether it's 25 or 50 patrons. And then later, Anders Tegnell came out and said, yeah, we should have locked down harder and stronger. I'm very, very sorry. I killed people, essentially, and decided to impose more stringent views. The data simply doesn't support it. Now people are still making these fucking bullshit arguments. Now we've got the data to make it. At the time, you could understand why people were potentially more skeptical. It's still stupid, but it's more understandable. And Yeadon goes on to say that I can now explain it to you, and it's taken me embarrassingly about 10 months before I realised it. And it's back to what I just said. You need to be symptomatic before you can infect others, which is just not true. In 2021, he started going on about the vaccines being used as a depopulation tool. And this statement was shown on the incredibly respectable LifeSite News. Mike Yeadon, ex-chief scientist at Pfizer, which is not what he was, has stated that it's now too late to save any person who's been injected with the COVID-19 vaccine. So, sorry, anyone that's listening, you're dead. He urges those that have not yet been injected with the deadly compound to fight for the continuation of humans and the lives of their children. The world-acclaimed immunologist, which he is not, goes on to outline the process, which he says will kill the vast majority of people now alive. Immediately on receipt of the first injection, around 0.8% of people will die within 2 weeks, which didn't happen. The survivors have a life expectancy of 2 years on average, but this is decreased with every booster. That also didn't happen. Yeadon states that the final goal of the currently administered regime of vaccinations can only be a mass depopulation event, which will make the world wars combined seem like a Mickey Mouse production. Billions are already condemned to certain, unchangeable, and agonizing deaths. Each person who has received the injection will certainly die prematurely, and 3 years is a generous estimate for how long they can expect to remain alive. That was a statement made by Michael Yeadon 5 years ago. In this interview, he also stated, I believe that they're going to be used to damage your health and possibly kill you. Seriously, I can see no sensible interpretation other than a serious attempt at mass depopulation. Or maybe they did what they said they were doing. That's the other alternative. But no, apparently, we've all got a limited time. We're all on borrowed time and all dead. So Yeadon goes on to say, this will provide the tools to do it, and plausible deniability, because they'll create another story about some sort of biological threat, and you'll line up to get your top-up vaccines, and in a few months or a year or so later, you'll die of some peculiar explicable syndrome that they won't be able to associate it, and they won't be able to associate it with the top-up vaccines. Again, I'll point out that absolutely none of these things happened, not even close. He went on to tell viewers that everything your government has told you about this virus, everything that you need to do to stay safe is a lie. And he added that lockdowns and other preventative measures were totalitarian control. This system is being put into place using lies, and it's being put into place for some purpose. And I believe that that purpose is complete totalitarian control. And I think the purpose of that is going to be mass depopulation, said Yeadon. I can't think of a single benign interpretation for the simple creation of these top-up vaccines, let alone the lies that surround them. Absolutely terrified that the combination of vaccine passports and top-up vaccines is going to lead to the mass depopulation and the deliberate execution, possibly of billions of people. But luckily, none of that happened.
Billions, wow.
Yeah, fuck a duck, absolutely. Now, there was something strange that happened at this point. He started to actually fall out with some people within the conspiracy world. Like, despite previously saying that he supported the use of this particular drug, he started saying that ivermectin was dangerous. And this is an interesting one because he, again, there was this live event that was hosted by Delingpole. I don't know which one it was. It might have been the one where David Icke got into a row with James Delingpole, but I can't remember. Anyway, he said at this, ivermectin is one of the most violent fertility toxins that I've ever come across. In some limited studies in humans, it reduces the ability to conceive and grow babies. Which, needless to say, is not true. Like, again, I wouldn't recommend taking ivermectin for COVID because it just simply won't help. And I certainly wouldn't recommend taking the animal doses because, as we know from the exploits from people like Jay Widener, it will give you explosive diarrhea for several days that basically results in what he described as black oil being ejected violently from his body for hours on end. Although he did come to the realization that this was maybe not the lining of his stomach and, compacted shit, but actually the archons, which are sort of demons that live in your soul. And he wondered whether basically, because these are essentially parasitic, he was shitting them out of himself. Probably not. But anyway. Also in September 2021, weirdly, Yeadon met up with this Tory MP to discuss the pandemic. This was reported by the Sunday Times. A group of conspiracy theorists who believe that vaccines are a tool for mass depopulation said that they'd met the head of the Conservative Party's 1922 committee in Westminster last week. The group's members, who maintain that ministers may be criminally liable for killing people, say that they told the MP Sir Graham Brady that vaccination should be stopped immediately. Brady had previously endorsed a report by Heart, a separate organisation linked to some of those at the meeting, which included claims that vaccines have already killed tens of thousands of Britons. He would not confirm whether this meeting took place, but he said that he backed vaccines, and listening to views does not amount to an endorsement, which basically says that he did meet with them. But, there you go. It was a cavalcade. It was an absolute razzle-stack, Brent. The people that were there were Anna de Buisseret, the lawyer who has since died, I believe, of cancer because she refused to take conventional treatment and decided to go down the quack route. Mark Sexton, the disgraced former policeman who called for the arrest of Nadeem Zahawahi, the former vaccines minister, who spent the last 5 years touting this crime number, which he says means that the dangerous murder campaign of the vaccines was being investigated by the police, whereas the police will tell you that that means no such thing and that they think he's a prat. Also, there was Michael Yeadon. So this week, Sexton posted a video on social media saying that they had a meeting with the senior Tory MP, which is obviously Graham Brady. John O'Looney, the aptly named funeral director who believes that thousands of old people were secretly euthanized in care homes, later added that the MP was Brady. So he can't keep his fucking mouth shut. Simon Clarke, the associate professor in cellular microbiology at the University of Reading, said that it's extremely unwise for policymakers to give credence to opinions that have no basis in observed fact. Scientific evidence cannot be debated like a popularity contest. The vaccine programme has been a great success. It's important for MPs to listen to members of the public, but clearly that does not amount to an endorsement of their views. And that was actually Brady after the fact, so to be fair. But they didn't stop there. In December 2020, O'Looney, who's best known for basically...
Oh, good.
Yeah, he's that fucking coroner or whatever that keeps claiming. Yeah, the Undertaker that keeps not a coroner. Sorry, like he's not that qualified. He keeps claiming that he finds fibrous clots in the bodies of people that have died from the COVID vaccine, and people that actually know what they're talking have pointed out several problems with this thesis of his. One, that he shouldn't be pulling shit out of people's veins because that's goes beyond his brief, and he's essentially tampering with the corpses of customers, which is a crime. Two, that's what happens to all blood in veins after death. They turn into these white fibrous clots. It's not uncommon. And three, and perhaps most damning, that some of the pictures that he's shown that appear to be, that he claims to be fibrous clots in in people's veins have been identified as people that know what they're talking about as dandelion stems and weeds from the garden. The man is a fraud. Anyway, him, the perpetually dishevelled Corbyn, what's his fucking name? Piers Corbyn, Mark Sexton and Yeadon, they filed a request to the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and what they wanted was the ICC to investigate and prosecute Boris Johnson, Bill Gates, and Klaus Schwab for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the genocide of the population of Britain, which I may remind you didn't happen. But anyway, they requested that the ICC start investigating this. And curiously, the ICC seemed reluctant to listen to a word that these blithering idiots had to say, which was obviously interpreted as them being in on the plot. So anyway, Michael Yeadon has got this new film out called Final Warning. And in it, right, he says that he's a lifetime research scientist and he worked in the pharma industry for 32 years. And I immediately went, oh, you shouldn't have said that, because obviously 32 years indicates that he's clearly a Freemason. that's the only possible explanation for the use of that particular number. He goes on to say, my most senior positions were at Pfizer. I was vice president and worldwide head of research in allergic and respiratory diseases. But since 2020, I've been speaking out against the fraudulent pandemic and the intentionally dangerous injections. And I don't want to be completely pedantic, but the injections only came out in December of 2020, so he's slightly overstating himself. He then goes on to say that the pandemic was fake and that he's been censored and smeared, and now he's giving up. This is his swan song. This is his final thing, basically. This is like that Black Sabbath gig that happened the other day. That's it. Forget it. It's not happening no more. He's fucking done with it all. And the reason that he's done with it all is because he keeps being censored and no one will let him say what he wants to say. And he reinforces this by pointing out that he's done over 300 interviews, which somewhat undoes the previous sentence that suggests that he's been censored. Because if he... But anyway, let's like, he then says that vaccines are not vaccines, which obviously they are. I mean, it's, again, like you can tell, it's the way that it's spelled is the first clue. But anyway, he says that there just wasn't a pandemic, that essentially there was never a COVID pandemic. And if there was, which there wasn't, it was definitely exaggerated to panic people, but there wasn't one. Which is, incoherent at best. But basically, regardless, there was no real health problem. And even if there was, which there wasn't, it wasn't serious. And so therefore, there was no need for vaccines. And by that logic, one can only determine that the vaccine must be evil. Which makes sense when you pass it out like that. He said, it's literally not possible for the injections to be helpful to anyone. And I'd like to point out at this point that that's just obviously not true because, we saw far worse outcomes in places with lower rates of vaccination. And we saw a tapering off of the spread of cases as more people became vaccinated. Also, we have data to show that the vaccine helps people with long COVID. Even people that weren't previously vaccinated, some symptoms of long COVID are alleviated if they have a belated vaccine. Also, excess deaths stopped after the mass vaccination, which wouldn't have stopped. It would have continued and it would have gone in line with the vaccination, as opposed to what actually happened, which was excess deaths happened with waves of the disease. Also, as I say, country with lower rates of vaccination saw far higher death rates. But he's not arrogant, Mike. Heaven forbid. He wants to remind you, and this is his own words, that he is the most qualified person in the entire world to say this. But he's not arrogant. He saw stuff in the vaccines that shouldn't have been there. And there was no reason for it to be there, Brent. Now, he doesn't elaborate what these things were.
I was going to say, what, metals?
Who fucking knows? And he doesn't know how he doesn't explain how
nanobots.
Yeah, probably. He doesn't explain how he identified this, and he doesn't highlight the fact that he's never ever worked in the field of vaccines. The deluded fool. But he goes on to say that he knows, and I'll remind you that he is the most qualified person in the world to tell you this, that they have been designed intentionally to injure, to kill, and to reduce fertility. And that's a bit over the top, isn't it? Why would you need to reduce fertility if you're killing people? Why would you need to kill people if you're reducing fertility? Why are you injuring these poor dying people who can't even sire an offspring? It's just over the top. But I suppose that just highlights how evil the Illuminati are. Also, if that was the plan, they were shit. Because it just didn't happen. But he's got an explanation for this. He has got an explanation. So I don't really think that he's not thought this through. I never claimed that it would do it to a lot of people or that it would be quick, except he did. Specifically, I remember saying at the time, I don't think they want to risk injuring and killing a lot of people early because people will spot it. Except that's not what he said. He said that everyone will be dead within 3 years. So he's not even internally consistent. But also, there were loads of deaths that people spotted, so much that the conspiracy crowd had to start blaming it on nurses and doctors murdering people. So why not just, if this is the plan, if it's a depopulation thing, why not just kill people with the virus and tell people it's the virus? Why do you need this fucking convoluted, overcomplicated Bond villain thing where it's like, this thing that's supposed to save you is the thing that kills you from the thing that doesn't actually kill you, which is the thing that we tell you that kills you, which is why you'll go and rush to get the thing that kills you, even though you think it saves you. That's fucking stupid. It's just a Rube fucking Goldstein machine of a plot. It's ridiculous. Also, again, he said on Steve Bannon's show that the vaccine was 50 times more likely to kill a child than the vaccine. So he's just lying, even within his own shit. He then starts because he seems to be pivoting away to a sort of more broader, generalized grand conspiracy arc. And he's worried about the use of digital cash and digital IDs. And he foresees a scenario where your digital ID will not be valid if you don't have all your vaccines. Dun, dun, dun! And, he shows this because he's found this company called Uvabeca, EUVABECA. And he's found that they're proposing a digitized source for all vaccine statuses to ease travel. And what he says is that this is proof that the EU envisions a future where everyone has a digital ID, and that this digital ID will only be valid if you have the latest up-to-date vaccinations, which he seems to say is inherently bad. But he surmises that this means that they plan regular new injections for everybody every year for the rest of their lives until they're dead. And again, that made me think, I thought they were to kill you. Why do we need lots of them? But anyway. So anyway, he shows this Uvabeca thing. And can you believe, Brent? It doesn't say what he thinks it says. Like, what he's saying is that this is essentially like a vaccine passport.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah, this is what he's saying. And then it's an EU plot. And basically, this is going to be for everyone because we're all going to be constantly given up new vaccines. Right. But what it's actually about is about consolidating records for easier access to the user. Not for other agencies, for the user. Also, and this is an important part, we are in the fucking EU. So that somewhat undermines his fears. Also, this is from the website that he puts. Is the European vaccination card voluntary for citizens? Yes. Both our pilot projects and the European vaccination card have been designed to be entirely voluntary for citizens. The EVC is a digital version of paper-based vaccination cards, which allow individuals to own and manage their own vaccination data. It doesn't use a centralized data storage system, and for other people to be able to access the citizen's data, the citizen must intentionally send their data or show their EVC to someone else. So it's voluntary, and it's there basically so that somebody can say, I've got it all in one handy file, rather than having to go to different places, and they don't even share the data with other people. But what about this idea about you won't be able to travel? I'll be traveling to the EU soon. Do I need to apply for a European vaccination card? No, you do not need to apply for a European vaccination card to travel in the EU. The EVC is not a certificate or a passport. It is still in the planning stages, with pilot projects set to take place in only 5 countries during 2024 and 2025, and these pilots are completely voluntary. But does the European vaccine card mean that I will be refused entry if I haven't had certain vaccines? There's the big one, Brent. What do you think it says? No, the EVC is a personal record and not a regulatory document. It's designed to help individuals keep track of their own vaccinations for their own health and continuity of care. Entry requirements for countries are determined by those countries. The EVC does not impose any restrictions or requirements for entry. So he's just made it up. That's one of the classic tactics of CT. Make it look like something similar and hope that people don't check. And then he starts ranting on about how this is all bullshit and how he knows that it's totalitarianism because basically being vaccinated doesn't protect anyone against fucking anything, which is bullshit. Like rabies, yeah, it does. It really does. Malaria, like if you're vaccinated, it lessens the chance that you can catch it. If it lessens the chance that you can catch it, it lessens the chance that you can spread it. It's very straightforward. He also goes on to say that he, personally, and you must remember that he is the most qualified person in the entire world to say this, would recommend that no one has any vaccines at all. And at this point, polio enters the chat and beats him to death with Ian Jury's walking stick. Like, the man's a fucking idiot. Anyway, he then goes on to say, when have governments ever cared about people's health? Therefore, any health measures that have ever been rolled out ever are just an excuse. And it's like, oh, fuck off. What are you, a 14-year-old who's about to form a punk band? Like, grow the fuck up. I'll tell you when governments start to care about people's health. When it starts to cost them money. When people can't go to work. Bottom line. Yeah, the bottom line. When the fucking economies start to collapse because people can't go to work or there's the possibility of chaos. And any health measures are just an excuse. What, like the AIDS education? That's just an excuse, is it? For what? That was in the 80s. What was the totalitarian plan of the Illuminati to force people to use condoms that take away all the filling? Is that it? Is that seriously it? Twat. Like, honestly, what an idiot. Anyway, he then says, people who want to kill us always do things. They give you an excuse. In this case, the vaccine will protect you from viruses. But the real reason is that they want to make you ill and kill you. And then he never gives a second thing. Right? So it's like, what the fuck are you on about, you weird old man? Anyway, he then says that all institutions, literally all institutions, are basically the same. They're all ran by the Illuminati globalists. And that these same group of people have been running all of these institutions for hundreds of years. And that the end goal is complete control of every person on the planet. And at that point, I thought they wanted us dead. And if they've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years, why haven't they achieved it? It's probably because they keep doing these fucking convoluted plots where it's like, no, let's not just kill them off with a disease. Let's pretend that we're killing them off with a disease. And then we'll introduce a virus which is there to save them. But the irony of that is that kills them. If they've been doing this for hundreds of years, why don't they just create a religion? Oh yeah, it's that. You've all got to do this. You've all got to jump off the cliff. You've all got to do that. These are numerous things that if you were in charge of literally every institution on the planet and have been trying to coerce the world into control for hundreds of years, that you could do. It would be less complicated than pretending there was a disease in order to kill people with a vaccine. But that's not the way that Mike sees it anyway. So, he then says that they, and he doesn't stipulate who they are, he sees us all as useless eaters. And then he asks us, knowingly, leaning towards the camera, where have we heard that phrase before? And if I'm brutally honest...
That's what I was thinking.
Well, we've heard it in loads of places. Is he talking about the Nazis? Is he talking about the Committee of 300? Is he talking about anti-Semitic things? People say that in the Talmud it refers to, which it doesn't, but is he talking about that? I don't think he's anti-Semitic. Well, yeah, but he grew up with a Jewish family who he praises. Now, that doesn't necessarily... Now, this is potentially true, the thing, because, there is that irony within the conspiracy world. It's we're not anti-Semitic. We're actually we like all people. We abhor racism and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, it's the Rothschilds. But that's not anti-Semitic.
What I was going to say is, think about, Christian militias. Those people, they're Christian, but they're anti-Semitic.
Yeah. And a lot of the time they don't know that they're being anti-Semitic.
I would say.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. He says that the digital ID will be the end of humanity. And then he goes on to say that countries already owe so much debt that essentially at some point there will be a financial crisis, which is obviously engineered. And at that point, the banks will seize everybody's assets. And at this point, I was like, whose fucking assets? I thought they all wanted us dead. Why don't they just why do they need this second elaborate debt-based thing to seize everyone's assets? Why can't they just wait until we're dead from this other fucking plot and then take our assets? What are they going to do with all our assets? Who are they going to sell them to? Everyone's dead. No one's got any fucking money. No one can. What are you going to do with my coffee? What does the Illuminati want with my coffee table? Seriously, Brent. Where in their nefarious plans does my fucking coffee table fall? I want to know. Anyway,
what is your coffee table? You got some weird shit in your living room.
It's just a coffee table. It's not. It's perfectly. It's got a drawer in it, but
it didn't belong to like Yorkshire Ripper or something like
that. No. No, it's Dr. Crippin's old apothecary table or something like that. No, it's nothing as exciting as that. I think I did get it from Wayfair though. I was very disappointed that no child was included with it, but you can't have everything. Maybe you need to build up a bit of a membership first. Maybe it's like club card points. Anyway, he then starts promoting the work of this guy called David Rogers Webb. And he's got this idea from a book called The Great Taking. And he says that this guy is a fucking genius, that he takes all his financial advice essentially from this guy. And he wrote a book about it called A Great Taking. Well, anyway, I don't know fuck all about that. So I went and found a review of this book from a website called wealthmorning.com. Now, The Great Taking, which is a book about finance and it's purported to be a sensible book. The opening line is, if you prefer, consider this a work of fiction or the ravings of a madman, which is exactly the sort of thing that I want to hear from my financial advisor when I'm thinking about investing in something. Anyway, the review basically says that this book is fucking ridiculous scaremongering. And it goes over its main premises. And these are things that Yeadon brings up in his interview and says that he believes in this because he's read in this book. A Great Depression is on the horizon and the velocity of money has begun collapsing. And the review says this isn't true, this is exaggerated. Money velocity tends to fall when interest rates are low, as they've been for a decade up until now. Low interest rates tend to keep the opportunity cost of holding cash down. Today, with higher interest rates, velocity appears to be increasing again. A temporary lower velocity of money is not indicative of a Great Depression anytime soon. No one can really predict crises. Black swan events that lead to financial crises are seldom predictable. There is a further argument in the book based on the problems which derivatives and self-asset-backed securities during the GFC, but the issues with these instruments are separate from company stocks. So essentially he's saying that he's got this wrong. This isn't indicative of a Great Depression on the horizon, which somewhat undercuts the concept because, that's his main thrust. Second point that the review disagrees with. Dematerialization of share certificates could pave the way to confiscation of collateral. According to the book, there are no property rights to securities held in book entry form in any jurisdiction globally. So what they're saying is that basically they can steal your shares off you and stuff like that. The review says this is completely incorrect. Here in New Zealand and Australia, many investors buy local shares directly on the register in their own names without the use of a nominee, though brokerage can be expensive. Dematerialization is the process by which paper certificates for share transactions are converted to electronic records. It enables nominee accounts to be used globally where a broker custodian holds your shares for you. I completely reject the idea that dematerialization was some sort of plot to pave the way to confiscate collateral, because that makes no sense. So what Yeadon's saying, and this book is saying, is that basically when it's digital, they can take everything off of you. And what this review says is that no, that's not true at all because it's still all backed up by security. In the old days, it was cumbersome and expensive dealing with physical share certificates. Trading direct on registers was also expensive and slow. Dematerialization and broker custodian held shares is simpler, cheaper, and opens up a wider range of trading facility, including margin, stop losses, and smart ordering. It means that on registries, you will list large banks or brokers holding the bulk of shares for individual clients as nominees. For example, HSBC nominees, these nominees are called street names. That's the main way through which global shares are bought, held, and sold today. The book seems to suggest that dematerialized shares held by banks or brokers as nominees could be at risk of debt claims against pooled assets. But segregated accounts which such brokers dealers may not actually be fully segregated. Failure to segregate accounts would be a serious breach of rules, and financial firms are regularly audited, brokers are tightly regulated, and seldom carry much debt. Clients have a real owner interest in their shares, which can be proven by trade confirmations, statement, and movements of funds. So what they're saying is they can't steal it off of you because A, that would be against the law, and B, you've got proof of ownership, and C, that's simply not how it works. SIPC or other backstop mechanisms are not well covered in the book. SIPC, for example, provides protection in the event of failure of a registered US member broker up to $500,000 regardless of the client's country of residence. Many brokers also carry further insurance. Much of the discussion that dematerialized shares are up for taking seems specious. Neither these brokers nor the financial system has any desire or incentive to destroy the very customers they depend on. I also get the impression from reading that brokerage clients of Lehman Brothers, LBI, lost money or had their assets subverted during the GFC. This was not the case at all. Remember Lehman Brothers, where was it Nick? What's his name? Fucked them basically. But this was not the case at all. When Lehman went bankrupt, regulators quickly established that the 83,000 brokerage clients could access their accounts. Then, under the supervision of the SEC and FINRA, Lehman Brothers customers' accounts were transferred to other brokerage firms for continuation of service, in particular Neuberger Berman and Barclays Capital. Disruption to either access or trading systems seems to have been fairly minimal for clients. As noted in Liberty Street Economics, the rapid transfer of customers' accounts to rival broker-dealers suggests that opportunity costs to LBI customers were small. So not only is he misrepresenting how this system works and how the security works, the example that he uses wasn't accurate to real life in this book. And then the big one, assets, even of the wealthy, can be taken when debt exceeds their value. The review says, yeah, but this has always been the case. If the market falls and you hit your margin limits, you'll start getting margin calls. Should you not be able to meet those calls, your assets may be sold at a loss. This is why we tend to use minimal debt when buying equities. Wider discussion around the global finance complex represents it as a big perpetuity, within the prices of all assets being driven by interest rates. The Fed is blamed for creating the everything bubble when interest rates were lowered to fight the GFC. These interest rates have now been increased, threatening the bubble. Actually, devaluations in asset prices have not been especially severe. In the case of many property companies, occupancy and rents have held up reasonably well. On one hand, this book predicts deflation, but then notes that the Fed has not yet lowered interest rates despite bank failures. If he's right on deflation, then interest rates would come down again. And then the review ends by pointing out that the major flaw in this theory that Michael Yeadon promotes is that the value of assets that people own has increased at a far greater pace than any of the debt that may be supporting them, which basically means that people have got more stuff than the debt that's owed, which means that you can essentially, you've got more than the debt. So even if they did start taking stuff, you'd have things left, which completely disproves the entire theory of the book.
The entire thing.
Yeah. Hey-ho. Anyway, so Yeadon then goes on to say that if you have a digital ID, you don't exist as a person, and that you can be cut off if you do anything that the government uses, essentially. Like you can't use any of their facilities. And he says that he's read this in several documents. And at this point I say, yeah, which ones? Show us. But he doesn't, because he hasn't, because he's a liar. He also says that basically, like, your ID will become invalid if you don't have injections, and then you won't be able to buy anything, and you're fucked. And there's a flaw in this, basically, which means that every single business in the entire world will have to have some sort of infrastructure built that supports this. which they're not going to do, are they? He then starts to go on saying, and see if you can spot this one. If you go outside of your 15-minute zone, you'll be cut off. So he's doing the widely debunked 15-minute city nonsense. Then, and I wonder why this was particularly apt to him, given his past. If you say hurty words on the internet, they will also cut you off, which comes across as childishly petulant paranoia, but hey, they won't give you any benefits if you don't have this ID. I thought they were going to let people fucking starve to death and they wanted to kill us. Why are they giving us benefits anyway? Like, and also, won't people start to notice that they're starving people to death and just like killing everybody? Won't this start people revolting? But like, no, apparently not. Now here's the thing.
They wouldn't notice because billions of us are dead.
Yeah, so there's no one left to notice. The other thing that gets me about this, right, is this cashless society thing gets on my fucking tits, right? It really gets on my fucking nerves because you don't understand, Neil. If you're on a digital ID and everything has to be bought digitally, they can cut you off and stop you from buying anything, and then you're fucked. It's like they can do that by stopping you getting access to cash. There's nothing that they could do to you in a cashless society that they couldn't do to you simply by stopping you getting money. It's the same thing. Oh, but Neil, you don't understand. The black market exists. If I can't get cash, I could get my friend Chris to use his cash to buy me stuff, and then I could give him something back in exchange for that cash. He's giving me a very weird... I didn't mean that. Anyway, you could do that with digital. You could say, buy me some fucking food on your digital things and then I'll build a shed for you or whatever. So the black market can still exist with digital. You just lie about what it is that you're buying. So none of these things, it doesn't make any sense. It's just paranoia. He then says, remember the two things that they'll do that they always say when they do things. Remember that, where he didn't say the second thing? Well, he says that the second is the real reason that they do stuff, which is to kill you. And at this point, I got cross because I was like, that's not what you fucking said. You said they always do two things, and that's just one thing, right? So what he's saying is they always do two things. They always tell you something isn't going to kill you, and then they kill you with it. And at that point, I was like, can you give me any examples of times in the past when they've said one thing and then killed you with it? How many of these past two-stage events where everyone was killed with the thing that was telling you was not to kill you, can he name? Like, when did they kill everyone in the past? It doesn't, it's bollocks, isn't it? He then goes on to say that he doesn't care because he's ready to die. He's a fucking hero, Brent. He's ready to die for the cause. And at this point, I thought, what a dreamboat. Anyway, he then goes on to say that you shouldn't listen to the mainstream media, but you should listen to him because he's done the research. And then he says that this is borne out because you can check his track record and see that he was absolutely right about the COVID vaccine being toxic. So you could trust him. But the major flaw in this is that it wasn't. So you shouldn't. Anyway, he then decides to recommend someone else, a fellow called Ben Rubin. Do you know who Ben Rubin is, Brent?
No, I don't think I've ever heard of him.
No, I'd not heard of him either. He works for UK Column, apparently, and he's particularly
That's probably why I've never heard of him.
Yeah, he's particularly concerned with the digital industrial complex, and his LinkedIn, which we must remember is an advertisement for potential employers, says, I spent 18 years at the cutting edge of corporate consulting, advising clients on complex issues relating to growth, transformation, and the deployment of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, distributed ledger technology, and connected devices. But in 2020, I came to the profound realization the global corporate system is fundamentally rigged against humanity and needs to be replaced. I now document corporate and government corruption as an investigative journalist and news broadcaster at UK Column and Rise UK, riseuk.com. I've recently launched a community of active citizens called Pattern, which is available at pattern.co.uk. And we're delivering the ideas of action required to catalyse the systemic transformation of British society for the benefit of every citizen. And rather annoyingly, pattern isn't like an acronym. I couldn't find what it meant. But fucking hell, do the work. Make it an acronym. What's wrong with you? Anyway, so we know what UK column's like, and I wanted to know if this guy was someone that should be taken seriously, because Yeadon, and he's the most qualified person in the world to tell you all of this. He says that this guy's pretty fucking sharp cookie, which is actually really bad for a cookie. Cookies shouldn't be cut sharp. They should be soft and edible. Anyway, I went on his Substack, rise.uk, and I wanted to see if this guy was somebody who we should listen to. And the first story on there was, is Bob Villain a Zionist plant? And it was this point that I thought, no, this person isn't a sensible person who should be listened to. Bob Villain recently caused a stir at Glastonbury by starting a chant of death to the IDF. But he thinks that maybe this is to, is a plant from Zionists to, make people not like anti-Semitic. I don't know what it is. It's bollocks. Anyway, he then has an article called The Death Cult, which is about how abortion is a death cult. Yeah. And also, basically what he's talking about is, and all the fucking smart people got really up in arms about this. Recently, there was a decriminalisation of a really old abortion law, which basically said that if a woman is past the 24 weeks of a legal abortion and does something that for whatever reason to end her term, to terminate her pregnancy, then she should not be considered a murderer. Because probably she's done it because of reasons like not being able to do it before, not being aware that she was pregnant, that she was in a situation where if she didn't abort the baby, she might die. And because we had really archaic laws, that they could be prosecuted. Like recently, Heidi Stewart, who's from the BPAS, who's been campaigning for this change in this law for years, said, "This is a landmark moment for women's rights in this country and the most significant change to our abortion law since the 1967 Abortion Act was passed. There will be no more women investigated after enduring a miscarriage. No more women dragged from their hospital beds to the back of a police van. No more women separated from their children because of our archaic abortion law." So most people saw this as a good thing, but obviously fucking idiots on the internet and conspiracy lot, they saw this as admission that you are now allowed to murder a baby the day before it was due to be born, which is obviously not true. There was another article on there in which this Ben Rubin guy, have you ever heard of the firms Deloitte and KPMG, Brent?
No.
What they are is they do auditing, consulting, the financial advisory, risk management, taxes and stuff like that. They do an admin for businesses essentially. But that's not exactly what Ben Rubin has pitted them as. He describes them as killers in an article called Klaus Schwab's Willing Executioners. And in this article, he claims that the firms Deloitte and KPMG are actively involved in murder because of their connections to government COVID schemes. And essentially, the connections to the government COVID schemes were that they did the auditing, the financial advisory, and the taxes and stuff like that, because, they're a fucking admin group. But not according to Ben. According to Ben, who's this man that Mike Yeadon has recommended wholeheartedly, they're killers, which was one of the indications that I don't think you should take this bloke seriously. Yeadon then has a bit of a scoop. He says, and pay attention, right, because this is important, that bird flu and chicken flu is fake, and that birds and chickens don't get flu.
I was hoping you was not going to say that.
He's got evidence for this. He's not just pulling this out of his arse. He has serious science to back this up.
I've never heard a chicken sneeze.
That's what he says. He says, "Have you ever heard of chicken coughing or sneezing?" And I thought, you know what? I haven't. So I Googled it. And you can watch videos of them doing it. If you Google Google chicken sneezing or chicken coughing.
How sweet, like the sneezing panda.
Yeah, a bit like that. Yeah. But he doubles down on it. It says that birds' lungs are completely different to humans' lungs, so they can't get flu. And at no point does he point out that, yeah, that's why they're different fucking diseases. That's why it's so difficult for one to pass over to the other zoonotically. But the long and short of it is that basically, yeah, just Google it. Chicken coughing or chicken sneezing, and you'll find videos of it. He then goes on to say that the PCR test is a fraud, okay? And again, this pisses me right off because it's one of these things where it's like, you could easily show that. All these people that said that you can basically find anything with a PCR test, right? Good, go and test a fucking house brick and determine that it's positive for HIV. Go on, you can do that. If the PCR doesn't work, how does it detect disease accurately? How does it detect pregnancy accurately? Even fucking Carrie Mullis said that he found viruses with it. He just didn't believe that HIV, the virus that he found with his PCR, caused AIDS. Yeadon then goes on to say that he doesn't think that monkeypox is real. Do you want to know why?
No.
Because monkeys are hairy. And so how do you get poxers on hairy skin? And then he goes on to say, well, if he's brutally honest, he hasn't really looked into this in any great detail. The man is a fucking prat. He then brings out the big guns. He says that viruses don't exist, or if they do exist, they don't give you illnesses and they don't do what Big Pharma tells you. And I thought it was curious that in the 32 years that he worked in the industry, he never spotted this. But when some twat puts this out on YouTube, he spots this. He then says that there's no such thing as contagion, and there's never been any scientific evidence of contagion, which is powerful shit. Like, that's just complete nonsense. You can go back to the earliest experiments with rabies by Louis Pasteur and people like that, and it's just nonsense. He believes that, right, you know if someone had a migraine and you stood next to them, Brent, could you catch that migraine off of them?
No.
Right, and if someone had angina or heart disease and you stood next to them, could you catch angina or heart disease from that person?
No.
Well, that fucking proves it, doesn't it? No, it doesn't, right? But what he says that illness, such as colds and flu, they're not due to you catching viruses, right? Okay. They're due to, and I don't want to blind you with science here, Brent, but they're due to a loss of equilibrium inside you.
Oh,
and he says, I know you think you've caught it off your work colleagues, right? But you haven't. And at this point, I thought, well, isn't that a bit of a coincidence that literally everybody in the office was experiencing the same time a type of equilibrium disruption that caused the same symptoms at the same time? Wouldn't that be
days
less?
Apart.
Yeah, wouldn't that be less likely than the idea that basically you've caught it off your coworker? Now, the other thing is that basically, like, again, you could test this. Go and do tests with rabies or Ebola or something like that. You'd be a hero because you'd save so many lives. Because then people wouldn't trust vaccines. You'd prove it, and people wouldn't die. But if you don't do that, if you don't go and infect yourself with rabies or Ebola to prove this point, you're either a coward or a charlatan or a liar. Also, I'd like to point out at this point that what he's saying there sounds very much like German New Medicine. Now, German New Medicine was created by Riker Gerd Hamer. And now, this is somebody that is well thought of within the conspiracy world. And I have fucking no idea why, because if you listen to his CV, he had a license to practice medicine from 1963 until 1986, when it was revoked for malpractice, right? His system, so he's already had his license taken off him for malpractice. And his system came to public attention in 1995 when the parents of a child suffering from cancer refused medical treatment, like chemotherapy, in favor of Hamer's methods. Hamer was charged with malpractice and was imprisoned in several European countries. Now, the girl was taken out of his care after getting really, really ill, and she was given chemotherapy, and she survived. But she very nearly fucking died because of his quack nonsense. He claimed that his method was Germanic. Now, this is where it starts to get fucked. Why did he claim it was Germanic? Well, this was an alternative to mainstream clinical medicine. Mainstream Jewish clinical medicine, which Hamer claimed was part of an ongoing Jewish world conspiracy to kill everyone that wasn't a Jew. So anyway, despite being sort of struck off by malpractice, Hamer continued to practice illegally, being investigated several times over causing the death of his patients. In 1997, he owned clinics in Germany, Belgium, Italy, Austria, and the Netherlands. And he was arrested and jailed for 12 months in Germany in 1997. He also served a prison term in September 2004 for 2 years in France on counts of fraud and unlicensed practice of medicine. Now, this is a person that lots of people within, I've heard David Icke talk about these ideas. Richard D. Hall and Andrew Johnson promote this heavily. And it sounds like Yeadon's promoting this as well. What Hamer believed was that there's no such thing as disease, and that shock and internal conflict causes the brain to create illnesses in people. And that this was all part of that modern medicine, modern clinical medicine, was all part of a Jewish conspiracy, and that the only way that you could get cancer was if a Jew injected it into you. Yeah. He also asserted that chemotherapy and morphine are used to mass murder Western civilization, and falsely alleged that chemotherapy is never used on a Jewish patient and is illegal in Israel, which is not true. He also promoted the idea that most oncologists are actually secretly Jewish, and that hypodermic needles that are used during chemotherapy actually are the things that give you the cancer that kills you. He also proposed that swine flu was used to mark people with these chips, which would eventually kill everybody who took that vaccine with cancer, which it didn't happen. And that the denial of the recognition of his theory that this is what caused illness, and the revocation of his practitioner's license. Well, you know who was behind that, Brent. It was the Jews. In 2008, Hamer presented a document where a supposed rabbi called Ezra Ivan Goetz confirmed the existence of a conspiracy among Jewish oncologists to use the torture of chemotherapy on all non-Jewish patients to kill all non-Jews, whilst Jewish patients receive correct treatment. Goetz, who just so happens to be a German Holocaust denier, who was active in the German Reich revivalism scene, was convicted of fraud in the German courts for fraud, defamation, and pretending to be a rabbi. So it's safe to say that Hamer's full of shit. All the people that he gets his stuff are full of shit, and therefore Yeadon is full of shit. He then goes on to say that elderly people don't need to worry about getting the flu vaccine because elderly people can't catch flu. Which fucks up the anti-COVID narrative totally, because I thought because before the vaccines happened, deaths and cases were explained as being flu rebadged. He says that literally all and every vaccine ever is designed to hurt people and not protect you from any disease. That's not just him saying this. He cites an expert. Sasha Latipova. Do you know Sasha Latipova? She's an expert, Brent. She's a fucking expert. She rose to prominence by claiming that COVID vaccines didn't have trials because they were rushed through on emergency use authorization. Simply isn't true. They went through 3 phases of animal and 3 phases of human trials. And basically, she got this entire thing from this line in the emergency use guidance, which says, from adequate and well-controlled clinical trials if available. That's what it says. It says that basically your data will come from adequate and well-controlled clinical trials if available. And she said that that's proof that they didn't have trials. Except that's bollocks. Because they did have trials. I can show you the fucking trials. They exist. So, and also, just because basically you're saying that if they're available, we will use them, doesn't mean that basically if they're not available, we won't use them. like in this case. Well, that's what she's implying. She's saying that's a get-out clause that means they don't have to be tested. It's not true. Also, she says that she's an ex-CEO of Big Pharma, and that's why she's an expert of this, but that's not true. Go look at her CV on LinkedIn. She graduated in 1999 with an MBA, so business, from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. So she's not a scientist. She's got business qualifications. From March 2006 to October 2016, she was the co-founder and executive VP of iCardiac Technologies, Inc., which is a safety analysis tech for heart drug trials. And now, she left in 2016. You know what happened in 2017? They're only fucking bought out for an enormous amount of money. So unfortunate for her, she missed out on a large payoff. But she went to work for, she's the co-founder and executive VP and director of a company called Clarovision. Clarovision make contact lenses. To suggest that this woman is like an expert in vaccines and pharmaceuticals is stretching the truth. It's saying it's stretching the truth. It's stretching the truth. It's just an out fucking lie. He also goes on to say that basically, when he was younger, absolutely no one was allergic to anything. And he suggests that basically peanut allergies might be down to you being injected with tiny amounts of peanut, and that whey injections make you allergic to milk, and that beef protein from plasma makes you allergic to meat. And he says, unfortunately, all of that is true. All of those ingredients have been found in at least one vaccine in the USA. And so I looked this up, right? Okay, I looked this phrase that he kept repeating up. Do you know the only source for this idea that basically allergies never existed until people started getting these ingredients in the vaccines? Do you know the only source for it?
German medicine?
Not quite. Natural News by Mike Adams. That's the only source for this powerful nonsense. So anyway, this is basically a lie, or if we're being charitable, a gross misunderstanding. The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia on their website says, frequently asked questions. My daughter has a corn allergy. Do I need to worry about her getting vaccines? I heard the rise in peanut allergies is because peanut oils are used in vaccines. Is this true? Both of these questions related to the notions that oils in vaccines can cause allergic reactions in those that have food sensitivities. Indeed, if someone has a sensitivity to a vaccine component, they may be advised not to get it. However, vaccines do not contain either corn or peanut oils. Oils would typically be introduced in oil and water emulsions for use as adjuvants. One such preparation, squalene, is approved for the use as an adjuvant in the US. It is included in Fluad, which is a flu vaccine for adults 65 and older. So it's not for children. Squalene is taken from fish oil, specifically shark liver oil. Squalene is also made in our livers and found in our bloodstreams as part of our cholesterol synthesis. So none of that's true. Absolutely untrue. He then goes on to quote, say that viruses don't exist, and he quotes Stefan Lanka. Now, for people that don't know, Stefan Lanka is this twat that claims that he proved that measles doesn't exist. Now, how Stefan Lanka said that he did this is that he said, I bet, I think it was $10,000, that nobody could provide me with a single paper that proves that measles exists. And this bloke called Dr. David Bardens went, what a twat, and provided 6. And Lanka refused to pay. So he took him to court, Bardens did, and he won. And Lanka was forced to pay him the money. Later, Lanka appealed, and he actually won the case. And he goes around saying that this basically proves that measles don't exist, that this man didn't prove it. But that is not what was said. The higher court's ruling, the judge noted that in the lower court, that it was proven that the publications submitted by the plaintiff Bardens in their entirety provided evidence of the existence and causative properties of the measles virus, and the determination of the diameter in the form requested by the defendant was successful, and the result is not objectionable. But the higher court also noted that one of Lanka's criteria, that the proof be contained in a single scientific paper rather than multiple papers, had not been met by Bardens. Now, did you catch that? Did you find why Lanka's essentially got his money back? Because he laid out the the stipulations for the bet, and he said, provide me with one paper. The man provided 6 papers. All of those papers prove the existence of measles, all of them. Okay, but because that didn't meet the specific criteria of what Lanka said, the court said, yeah, technically, like, he can refuse to pay you.
What a job's worth.
What a fucking pathetic bastard. That's so embarrassing. Like, it's ridiculous. It really is. Then Yeadon says that he doesn't lie, but you must trust him because he's an expert. And then he says that you might notice that he only talks about things that he actually knows about, and that he has restricted his comments only to things about respiratory illnesses. And at that point, I nearly punched the fucking laptop because I know you haven't, you fucking liar. You've mentioned vaccines, ingredients of vaccines, how they work, allergies, how allergies are formed, viruses, whether they exist, contagion in general, animal diseases, digital currency, town planning, 15-minute cities, slave state digital prisons, the concept of assets, the Illuminati, and the fact that he is willing to die fighting them. He then goes on to say that a cold isn't caused by a virus, it's caused by a bit of the lung drying out. And it's like, that's not true, but all right, I'll buy it. What causes it to do that? And he never explains. But he says that, to support this, he says that, you know, in cystic fibrosis, people with cystic fibrosis get a lot of colds. And that proves it, doesn't it? Because it's to do with regulation of liquid in the airways. Now, can you see where he's wrong with that? Cystic fibrosis is where you get a load of mucus in the lungs. It's not where you get dry lungs, and the colds are caused by the mucus trapping bacteria in it. He's talking about dry lungs. If you're talking about dry lungs, you couldn't use a worse example than cystic fibrosis. Like, he then goes on to say that he believes that all illness is caused by a lack of equilibrium and that contagion is a myth. And he says that his version is, and I quote, a better explanation than the official story. Yeah. Yeadon then says that he knows that there was absolutely no pandemic. And again, he's not just pulling this out of his stupid arse. He's got reasoning behind this. He says that Dennis Rancourt, who is an idiot that claims that basically climate change isn't real and that COVID simply didn't exist, said that the pandemic was declared before there were signs of illness. He said that basically there weren't people dying en masse when they actually declared the pandemic. And then that proves that the pandemic was a lie. And there's a simple problem with his reasoning that that's not true. There were loads of deaths in China and in Italy before it was caused a pandemic. By the end of March 2020, global COVID-19 data from the World Health Organization and other sources indicate the following. There were approximately 693,224 confirmed cases reported worldwide. The figure comes from the WHO's data compilation, which transitioned to region-specific dashboards and direct reporting from member states around March 22nd, 2020. At that time, in March 2020, around 33,106 deaths were attributed to COVID-19 globally, showing a rapid increase in the last days of the month. These numbers are likely underestimates due to limited testing and varying reporting practices, also due to delays in data collection. Differences in case definitions and testing strategies across countries also affected the accuracy of these early figures. For context, in the United States specifically, by the end of March 2020, there were approximately 185,469 confirmed cases and 3,835 deaths. In the UK at the time, there were 22,000 confirmed cases and 1,400 confirmed deaths. So Rancourt's just a twat. And again, like, that has been just completely debunked. Yeadon then goes on to say that the PCR test gave false positives and that when anyone died, they called it COVID, which we've discussed just simply isn't true. And then he hints that the elderly were murdered. Dun, dun, dun. And then he goes into sort of well-known twatty conspiracy theory realms by saying that the Club of Rome and the Trilateral Commission created the concept of pandemics. And it's like, the Black Death would have something to say about that. Like, I think the concept of a pandemic was probably well known before the Trilateral Commission was a thing. But they didn't just create pandemics, Brent. You know what else the Club of Rome and the Trilateral Commission invented simply to scare people. Climate change, obviously, but also the entire concept of disease.
Of course.
Because as we know, there is no documented evidence of anyone contracting any disease prior to, the 50s or 60s when the Club of Rome was formed. It simply didn't happen. Now, also, Yeadon, and you've got to remember, he only talks about respiratory things. There's certainly not things that he has no fucking clue about. But he's a bit knowledgeable about climate change as well. And he can accurately tell you that it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, Brent. And he knows that, right? Okay. Because I don't know whether you know this, right? But temperatures have changed in the past. We know that. You silly son.
So they're bound to change again.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it's not about the change, is it? It's about the rate of change. That's what people are concerned about. But he says you shouldn't worry about that because carbon dioxide doesn't cause any problems ever. It's not a greenhouse gas. Do you want to know how he knows this? He says that changes in temperature always precede a CO2 rise, not the other way around. And he says it's common sense if you think about it. He says that basically all that CO2, it just goes into space. And again, he's not just pulling this out of his arse. He has scientific knowledge that can prove this. And it's simple when you think about it. What happens to a can of Coke when it gets warm? Or a glass of Coke when it gets warm? What happens to fizzy drinks when they get warm, Brent? They go flat. Yeah, which means that the CO2 has left them, which means that the temperature was caused by the CO2 leaving, not by the CO2 being added. It's like, no, you silly sod. The temperature change was caused by the temperature, right? And the CO2 was released by the can being open. That is a stupid explanation. Anyway, is there any merit to these studies that show that historical CO2 levels lag behind temperature and don't lead them? No. Climate scientist Peter Hildebrand, director of the Earth Science Division at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, says there's merit to those studies. In the pre-industrial age, the CO2 response to temperature was that the temperature would go up and CO2 would go down. Oh, perhaps I'm wrong. Oh, no, wait. Well, if the temperature went down, then the CO2 would go down. And the reason for that, when the temperature went up, the whole biosphere revved up and emitted CO2, and we had more CO2 in the atmosphere. So we understand that process. However, in the post-industrial age, the opposite is true. Increasing CO2 in the atmosphere is leading to increased temperature. So two different things happened. One pre-industrial, where temperature was driving the CO2, and post-industrial, where CO2 was driving temperature, which means a completely different physical, biological process is going on. And we don't understand what the consequence of that change is. Skeptical science says CO2 did not initiate warming from the past ice ages, but it did amplify the warming. In fact, about 90% of the global warming followed the CO2 increase. But increasing concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere increases global temperature. Increasing global temperature also increases the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Yes, you can have both. Antarctic ice core records of the past climate change helps us understand the Earth climate change system and show that human-caused climate change is fundamentally different from natural, glacial, interglacial climate changes. So, for someone who says that he knows how to read science, he doesn't sound like he's read fucking anything. Literally every single thing that he said thus far, every single expert that he's brought forward is provably wrong, with a minimal effort in trying to debunk it. It says that climate change is a myth. And do you know why it's a myth? It's to stop us from using cars, apparently. And he says, and again, see if you can notice the flaw in this reasoning. Exhaust fumes from cars are in fact cleaner than the air that we breathe due to catalytic converters, especially in diesel cars. That's not true, is it? It's just not true. Now, yes.
Yeah, I sort of noticed a flaw everywhere there.
yeah. It's just not true. And also, diesel exhaust, some of diesel exhaust is toxic. It can irritate the eyes, nose, and lungs. It can cause respiratory issues, headaches, dizziness, nausea. Long-term effects are increased risk of lung cancer. The man's just talking shite. But he also says that EV cars are also a ploy to get people out of petrol cars. And he thinks that the car companies are probably in cahoots with the World Economic Forum. And
he's
says
got
that,
this all ass backwards, hasn't he?
he's got it all completely backwards. But he says that he knows that this is true because, right, he's been told by a lawyer friend that you soon won't be allowed out of your 15-minute zones. And do you want to know how his lawyer friend found this out? Completely by accident. He went to to buy a new car or to have his car upgraded. And they put loads of stuff into his system, into his computer system and stuff like that. And when he went back to the shop to pick it up, he noticed that the showroom had added this thing which restricted his driving from 15 minutes outside of his home, which I must remind you isn't a thing. Anyway, when he was asked why his car had been restricted to this, the lawyer was told by the people in the thing that, this is an upgrade that all cars are going to have in the future. Now, I don't want to call Mike Yeadon a liar, but I don't believe that story. Do you?
No.
It's
Here,
obvious.
Let me sell you a car.
Yeah.
Sell you a car that you're not allowed to drive.
I'll give a shit if you can drive it or not. You've already paid for it. But yeah, it's ridiculous. He also says that he says that in modern cars that there are several cameras that are just trained to watch you. And he says that the law says that if you try and wear a mask to stop these cameras watching you, then you'll go to prison. And it's like, well, that's ironic because you're against masks. But also it's like, what exactly is this doing, this camera that's filming you? And I think, I forget whether he was saying that or implying that it's kind of to do with stuff like, this sort of like where AI can monitor you to see if you're like fit for driving. There might be something that's like a kernel of truth in this, where it's like there's a system that basically says if you start to nod or whatever, that it basically sets off alarms, says pull over, you're falling asleep. That might be a real thing. This sounds like shite. This sounds like utter shite, basically. But anyway, he says that basically there's been a global coup d'etat which started in 2020 that relies on digital ID. Why do they want to do it? Right, okay. So remember, he's been talking about for an hour and about 45 fucking minutes at this point. So you've got to come up with the big guns as the explanation. And he said that there's definitely a coup d'etat starting in 2020 relies on digital ID. And so, are you ready for this explanation, Brent? Why do they want to do it?
Come on, hit me.
Why do they want to do it? I don't know exactly, but I just think that they are deeply evil people that feel inclined to control the lives of people like you and me, who they regard as profane, useless eaters. Well, thank Christ he's not being vague.
I don't know why they're doing it. It's just because they're Jewish.
Yeah, essentially. And they're all like that, aren't they? But like, he then goes to say, and at this point, he looks really genuinely cross at this point. And he says, you didn't know the injections were dangerous, but you do now. So anyone who rolls up their sleeve for an injection, I have absolutely no sympathy for you. You think, right, well, fuck off then. Anyway, he ends on a high. I'm saying to you, we will win if enough of us bottom up simply refuse to go along with their harebrained plan. And I don't think he means by grabbing your ankles. I think he means from the bottom up of society. But anyway, I digress. So if they want to frighten you with some mad pandemic that doesn't happen, don't be afraid. If they want to tell you to stay at home when it doesn't suit you, go outside. If they insist that you wear masks, don't wear masks. There's no possible benefit for you wearing masks. I thought you just said that you should wear masks in cars. So there is one possible benefit. Anyway, I digress. Certainly, if they want you to roll up your sleeve, do not accept any injection. Certainly not of these mRNA technologies. They certainly like their digital control technologies, so do not sign up for digital ID and many other things, really. Try and stay healthy. Go and talk to real people. Give them a hug. Eat good food. Exercise. Be out in the daylight. And we'll be all right as long as enough of us do not comply. What was that fucking sunscreen song? That sounds like that. The one thing I know is to wear sunscreen.
Baz Luhrmann.
Baz Luhrmann. That's turned into Baz Luhrmann at the end. It started off as a very sort of juvenile sort of treatise on anarchy, but ended up sounding like a fucking Baz Luhrmann song. And I'm afraid I came away from that entire thing by thinking, what a sad juvenile. What an absolutely tragic person. Utter bullshit from top to tail. And this man is not a stupid man. So something is going on here, right? Okay. Either he's lying or he's willfully lying to himself. And I honestly don't know which is more dangerous and more sad. What's your thoughts, Brent?
Yeah, I think it's the second one. And I'm just wondering, I was wondering, why has this man even got an audience? Because he's not exactly saying anything new. He's just kind of rehashing the same shit that other people say. And the reason, obviously, he has an audience is because of this whistleblower status.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. He has an appeal to authority.
Yeah.
Which is a logical fallacy. Brilliant.
Yeah. It's strange, isn't it? Because to say, and it just highlights again, like the willingness that people are like with him, and like say Alfred Baller, basically he'll say something and people say you can't trust him. He works for Pfizer. It's like, well, you trust Yeadon specifically because he worked for Pfizer. Oh, he's got the inside knowledge. He's a whistleblower. So it's so selective. When you see like people like like Riker Harmer being arrested time and time again for like causing the death of patients or being involved or being suspected in the death of patients. And people go, they do the mental gymnastics and go, oh, he's getting flack. He's over the target. Oh, the mainstream are discrediting Yeadon because he's obviously telling the truth. It's like, wow, the fuck do you go from there? Where do you go from there? You can't, because it's an ideological mantra. It's more akin to a religion at that point than truth-seeking or fact-finding or anything like that. And I know people would like to present themselves as like just asking questions and like, willing to take on board information that isn't through the mainstream. But that's not what you're doing. It's just not what you do. It's certainly not what Michael Yeadon's doing here. Like it's just crazy. Like, but hey ho. But that's Michael Yeadon's final warning.